All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the first set of reading notes here from chapter 12. So, in terms of units, this will be unit 4, and it's reading number 3. Okay, so kind of where we left off yesterday was with the beginning of the War of 1812, and obviously that's going to be that conflict between the United States and Great Britain over a number of things, including, but not limited to the arming of Indians against the United States and also the impressment of our sailors. So, just to kind of set this up, you'll recall that America is really divided on this war and if we should even be fighting it. A lot of the people in the Northeast, especially in New England, who are pretty loyal Federalists, are really opposed to Madison pursuing this war, and they feel like it's going to hurt commerce, and ultimately they want to work things out with Britain. So this war, in a lot of ways, it starts off with America very much divided, but ultimately you guys are going to see that the war is going to serve to unite the country in a way that maybe nobody even expected. So in terms of where we stand when the war starts, I mean, we're really not ready. Our army is kind of scattered. We're still dependent at this point on some old sort of revolutionary generation generals, and the ideas that they have about how to fight the war are kind of dated, I guess you could say. Initially, we launch basically an invasion of Canada that is centered on 3 different areas. This is going to turn out to be a big mistake. We try to attack around Detroit and then north into Montreal, and then sort of in the middle of those 2 places on Lake Ontario. The author points out that maybe if we had concentrated on just taking Montreal, we could have won a victory, but because we scattered our forces the way we did, this invasion really flops. So again, we invade Canada, and it doesn't work out so well. We do see a series of victories for our young Navy on the Great Lakes. And one of the most important naval leaders that we have during this time period is a guy named Oliver Hazard Perry. So you want to know who Admiral Perry is, and the victories that our Navy gets in the Great Lakes region really kind of keep us in the war, despite the fact that we struggle to some degree on the land. Now things kind of plot along in this war, and it's to a degree in the first couple of years is sort of uneventful in terms of who's getting the upper hand. But by 1814, Napoleon is actually defeated. He's exiled, and he's actually sent to this small island called Elba in the in the Mediterranean, sorry. But once Napoleon is exiled, the British are going to turn their full attention to the United States. Interestingly, Napoleon's exile is only going to be temporary. He's going to actually make a comeback and be defeated again and actually be exiled to an even more deserted island. But in the meantime, with Napoleon on the shelf, the British are able to turn their full attention to the United States, and this is really bad for us. August of 1814, 4,000 British troops land at the Chesapeake Bay in Virginia, and they march north on D.C. Ultimately, they're going to burn the Capitol building as well as the White House. Dolly Madison, the president's wife, actually barely escapes. She sort of heroically stays in the White House as long as she can. Her and her staff, her retinue, are taking out like silver and these priceless, paintings. Famously, she saves a painting of George Washington because she knows what the British will do if they get their hands on it. So, as she's leaving town from one side of town, the British are coming into town on the other. Washington does burn the White House. Inside it's not completely burned down, but there's extensive damage inside. Same goes for the Capitol. They have to actually rebuild the Capitol, but the British also, during this same sort of military action, bombard Fort McHenry in Baltimore. And of course, this is when Francis Scott Key, watching from a British ship, actually writes the Star Spangled Banner. Now, along with this action, right, the British also decide that they are going to take the Mississippi River Valley. In order to do that, they want to take the city of New Orleans. Here, the British run into the buzzsaw that is Andrew Jackson. He meets them with a force of, and you guys can see on the notes here, it says 7,000 irregulars. I mean, he had free people of color, pirates, Indians, militia, you name it. Jackson's force was really a hodgepodge and kind of a group of misfits. But he's in a very good defensive position in New Orleans. He's just come off a major victory against the Indians at a battle in western Florida called Horseshoe Bend. So he comes in with a lot of confidence. He's going to win a major victory at New Orleans over 8,000 well-tested British troops who are, fresh from the Napoleonic Wars. So the fact that he's able to beat these guys with this ragtag squad he has is pretty amazing. Basically, Jackson becomes a national hero overnight for this action at New Orleans, and this is going to propel him to the presidency. Interestingly, this also becomes like something that the United States can really hang their hats on. It's a big victory. It's very dramatic. Thousands of British troops are killed, whereas Jackson actually loses less than 100 men. So this is a major sort of propaganda victory for the United States as well. The weird thing about this battle is that nobody at the time knows it, but the treaty to end the war, the Treaty of Ghent, signed in Belgium, has already actually been signed on Christmas Eve of 1814. By the time that the Battle of New Orleans takes place, it doesn't happen until January of 1815. So here it is a week or 2 weeks after the treaty's been signed, and Jackson and his men are fighting. They win this major victory, even though the war is already over. It shows you how slow that news travels. So the Tsar of Russia, Alexander, has played a major role in negotiating this treaty. He had a lot of interest in this, and was looking for a way to sort of put this conflict to bed. Part of it was that he's dealing with Napoleon as well, and he doesn't want the British to get sort of bogged down, in America. So he would rather have them at full strength. So he wants to broker this bargain. 1814, Americans send John Quincy Adams, who's the son of John Adams, and Henry Clay, who's one of these young Western warhawks, to Ghent. The victories that we won at Baltimore Harbor and New York had given us sort of an upper hand, in terms of negotiations. The British asked for an Indian buffer state between us and Canada around the Great Lakes. They also asked for captured territory in Maine. But that being said, we refused to give in to any of those demands. And honestly, this treaty kind of stops the war exactly where it started. So we'll see that. And Britain's dealing with, still more drama in Europe. So they're kind of eager to walk away from this as well. So the terms of the treaty are really weird. I mean, honestly, it's more of like a ceasefire than it is a peace treaty. For instance, there's no mention of the Indians, who you guys will remember the British had been arming. They don't promise to stop doing that again, right? Search and seizure and impressment, no promise to stop that, although eventually they do. Same thing goes with the ship confiscations, and the orders in council that the British had basically used to make the embargo legal. So, the fact that neither side really gets anything, there's no territory gained, there's no territory lost, really, more than anything else, it kind of demonstrates that neither side won. And again, this kind of ended in a stalemate when both sides got tired of the fighting and were ready to walk away from it. So you could call the War of 1812 probably a draw and be safe. Now, it's interesting. All the while that this is happening and while this fighting is going on, there is a lot of drama in New England, right? Remember that in New England, trade with Britain was really the key to their sort of economic success. And even during the war, illicit trade between the New Englanders and the Old Englanders had continued. There's even talk that some of the Federalists in New England were helping the British out. They called them blue light Federalists because there was rumors that they had put up lights to help them know where to land their boats. So in New England, there's talk about maybe negotiating like a separate peace with Britain. I mean, some of this stuff really bordered on treason in terms of where New England was compared to the rest of the country. So right around the time of the Treaty of Ghent being signed and the Battle of New Orleans, there is a big Federalist meeting in Hartford, Connecticut. They call it the Hartford Convention. It's a secret meeting, and at the meeting, the Federalists discuss ways to sort of deal with the ongoing, struggle. So they had talked about, things like asking the government for reparations for the trade that they had lost. They had talked about maybe trying to force a new constitutional amendment that got rid of the 3/5 clause. and other things like, for instance, for a war declaration, a 2/3 vote of Congress, a vote about embargoes, and they also were thinking about asking for a one-term limit for the president